of fantasy champions, Spotlight Sports Network is excited to tell you about an amazing deal from Thrive Fantasy, your place for daily fantasy sports and esports. Right now with promo code SS Network, Thrive Fantasy will match up to $50 of your first deposit. So go to thrivefantasy.com and sign up now with promo code SS Network. That's thrivefantasy.com, promo code SS Network. Do you like the Oakland A's? Are you a fan of the Golden Knights? Do you love the Los Angeles Chargers? Well then, my friend, you're in the right place. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show with your host, Jake the Snake SIlva, brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another episode of the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Thank you so much for joining in. Like me, follow me, and subscribe, and hit the bell button for all future episodes of the Snake Sports Talk Show and even previous ones, just to keep you guys up to date. Man, do I have a lot to talk about here tonight, because what a wild and wacky wildcard weekend it was this past weekend. There's a lot that I have to cover from here. Obviously, here on the hour, in the last but not least of the hour, I will have my, instead of top 5, I will have my top 3 winners and losers from the wild card weekend. You guys do not want to end up missing that. One of my good special guests, Jeff Hammond, aka Hammer from Hammer's House, is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about Raiders and Mets, and of course, everything we need to know around the league. But first and foremost, I want to start with this, because, man, you already knew there was going to be an awful lot of rumor buzzes, and it was only a matter of time until the word was spoken. What's going on, Sacred? Thank you so much for coming on here, my friend. But here's the thing. So you obviously know what the deal is with the Philadelphia Eagles. All of us basically had said that since that last game of the season, that was it. It was going to be done. Over. And you know what? Finally, it happened. So I had just gotten word from Monday that Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, has decided enough is enough, and they fired Doug Pederson. And you have to think about the reasons behind this decision. Now, of course, it was not an easy one. And think about it this way with Philadelphia. There are pros and cons to this move. The pro reason of why to fire Doug Pederson. And everybody's going to say, well, he benched Carson Wentz, and the relationship is torn. There's nothing to repair it. There's no way to repair this relationship. So then he goes and starts Jalen Hurts to help to boost his team to win games. And then, oh yeah, what's the one thing that Doug did that a lot of people started to rumor buzz, and Twitter was on a complete rampage, and so much more. Oh, yeah, that was the time he benched Jalen Hurts just because he said he wanted to win and felt like Nate Sudfeld, who's been there for 4 years, a third-string quarterback for a reason, that he deserved snaps. Well, trying to win the game and going with Nate Sudfeld because he deserved snaps are two totally different things, Doug. There's a pro behind that because it pissed off a lot of Philadelphia fans. It pissed off a lot of Giant fans. But again, we could just say it's the NFC East, to say the least. Now, here's the con side of firing Doug Pederson. Think of two coaches from this Philadelphia organization, and I can name two of them, along with Doug Pederson, who were winning coaches. Okay, let's think back to the one who had just won a Super Bowl last year, Andy Reid. Andy Reid took Philadelphia to the Super Bowl, lost to Tom and New England, and then also was competitive in the NFC, and he gets fired. Oh, no, wait. Let's think about Chip Kelly. Now, of course, everybody doesn't really like to mention about Chip Kelly and his play style and so on and so forth. But he was still managing to try to win games, right? And he gets fired. And now here we are with Doug Pederson. Wins the only Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles. They become competitive. Carson Wentz, he makes it into the playoffs, even with lawn chairs for wide receivers. And then he gets fired up to the end. Isn't that kind of interesting? It almost makes it feel like it's difficult to be a Philadelphia Eagle head coach. Because I don't want to end up spitting anything out. But look at what's happening with Dallas. Okay, they go with Mike McCarthy. McCarthy brings on Mike Nolan. They're both completely outdated. Nolan's officially gone, but the only question is, can Mike McCarthy rebound, or was this a terrible mistake to hiring him? Think of also, too, Tom Coughlin. Now, I understand the Giants won 2 Super Bowls, but even he had a 4-year streak of losing. New York retained him? This is why the NFC East I will never understand. But here's what I do know. If Jeffrey Lurie made this decision because of the fact he's trying to repair the relationship with Carson Wentz, as I've said before, Philadelphia moved on from Wentz in 2017. They completely forgot about the guy who had an MVP caliber season. They forgot about the guy who, by the way, is a head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, who transformed Carson Wentz to being one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And they also forgot about the guy who punched their ticket into the playoffs. All settling for a one-year wonder in Nick Foles, build a statue, then you draft Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round. And what good is that going to do? Philadelphia now is in this pit that they honestly should have never been in, but they forced themselves into it. Now they have to pay the prices because Pederson's gone. I'm sure he's probably going to end up looking for another job. There's rumor buzzes about the Jets and Joe Douglas have a connection and have a relationship. So there's a possibility there. There are other possibilities as well that can go along with it. But then the other part is, if Carson Wentz still, even after this move, demands a trade, I don't blame him. I do not blame him. Remember, this is not a decision amongst what happened with Doug Pederson in the end and what's been happening with Carson Wentz since 2017. This is all within the core of the organization, and that is the front office. That deals with Howie Roseman, and that deals with Jeffrey Lurie. The two main components that make things happen. Okay, remember, even when you're working into a business and you know you have the one worker who you put a lot of trust in, one of the managers, you give him the ability to where he can run the store and hoping that the employees he hires are the ones capable for the job. But you don't end up giving a bigger bonus to a guy who honestly, even if he's stuck around for a whole lot, he's kind of average. He's not a bad worker versus the guy who strived to be employee of the year. and a guy who's been employee of the year for like 2, if not 3 years. You just can't make stuff like this up. Philadelphia has a big, they got a big situation amongst them. And this is where, if Carson Wentz still demands this trade, I don't blame him. Philadelphia has to go through this because they forced themselves into this pit that should have never happened in the first place. Now it became a rippling effect to Howie. It became a rippling effect to Doug Pederson. And it's become a rippling effect to Carson Wentz. And that's what's going to be the difficult position for Philadelphia to really recover from. Okay, man, what a wild card weekend it was, right? We had so much fun all throughout this weekend. I think all of us nationwide, we're all Cleveland Browns fans, apparently, right? Because Cleveland, they never made it into the postseason since 2002. And then just Sunday night, they pulled off one of the biggest stunners in the NFL, and they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they won their first playoff win since '94. And Belichick was the coach at that time. And he faced off against who would soon to be his team, the New England Patriots. Isn't that interesting? But let me just tell you the things that I noticed from this weekend. Because Chicago looked like the absolute worst team this weekend. They only generated 9 points against one of the toughest defenses in the NFC, in the New Orleans Saints. And again, the questions are, I just think you're not going to get a whole lot from Mitch Trubisky. You're not going to get an awful lot out of him. But listen, he is the guy that I just don't see an it factor with him. I don't. Chuck Pagano, recently, as I got news, he had just announced retirement. Now they need a new defensive coordinator. And a lot of people have been pushing, back and forth between Matt Nagy. I don't think Matt Nagy's a bad coach. I just think he needs to have the right support group. And I think he needs to have the right player to generate offense. And right now, Mitch Trubisky, you could say what you want, but I don't think he is that specialty type of quarterback. Absolutely not. By the way, Pittsburgh, and all my colleagues heard me out on this, and I've said this, the last couple nights. But if I'm Pittsburgh after Sunday, I am moving on from this Big Ben era. I am moving on. My colleague tried to convince me, but he threw for almost over 600 passing yards. That's great and all, but when I'm not getting generated offense like I should have, that's where does he really have stuff in the tank? You had 2 quarterbacks this weekend that had tough breaks. That was Phillip Rivers and Big Ben. And Phillip Rivers, as we all know, is so limited because of the fact that he just does not have that arm strength. He doesn't have that quality decision-making like he may have had, 10 years ago. Whatever the case may be, Phillip doesn't have that. And Frank Reich knows it. He knows Phil's limitations. But in the middle of that game, for as close and as competitive it was against Josh Allen in Buffalo, Phillip became limited. You expect him to throw the deep ball knowing he doesn't really have a whole lot of gas in the tank to throw it. You know how limited he is. And then Big Ben. My biggest concern and question when the season started was how his shoulder was going to favor out. And then once they were 11-0, oh, Pittsburgh, they're the high favorites to go into the Super Bowl. Are they now? A running core that only generates less than 4 yards a carry, and the rest of the offense that's been leading the league in drop passes? I don't think so. Pittsburgh, to me, did not look that intimidating. And what's worse, you've got Chase Claypool and you got Juju Smith-Schuster all speaking loud noise because it's the Browns, right? Or what about the losses that you suffered? Well, it's Washington, isn't it? Or maybe it's Buffalo. It's just them. I don't know about you, but Washington got better on their defense. Buffalo definitely got better on their offense. And Cleveland got better at maturity. The second Kevin Stefanski came into the building, and mind you, he was not there, not present, and Cleveland managed to win the game. And all of you, don't mistake yourselves, but all of you, like myself, were paying attention to one person, Baker Mayfield. Am I right? You all paid attention to Baker Mayfield because, well, it's Baker Mayfield. He's got an average arm. I don't think he'll deal with the pressures, and Pittsburgh's going to be all over. Well, last time I checked, Pittsburgh's defense and TJ Watt, Defensive Player of the Year this year, didn't even get one single touch out of Baker. And this is with a second-string lineman who provided the blocks on the interior. He gets hurt. Then you get a third-string lineman, and they still could not touch Baker Mayfield. They couldn't get one little smidge. Nothing. So what does that tell you about Pittsburgh now moving forward? I think if it were me, for good graces, I'm moving off of Big Ben. We've been seeing this kind of charade now for the last couple of years, and I do not believe that Pittsburgh's learned as much like how Kansas City knows they could not roll with Alex Smith for long. That's why they had to bring in Patrick Mahomes. I think Buffalo, to the point, they knew Tyrod Taylor, injury prone, he could not play as much. That's why Josh Allen came into the picture and Brian Dable transformed him as an offensive coordinator. There are teams. Look, for instance, the Chargers. The Chargers knew Phillip Rivers was not going to have it in the tank for very long. That's why they moved on. He goes respectfully to the Indianapolis Colts, and they drafted Justin Herbert at number 6. They are sticking with their future because that's the right thing. Pittsburgh, up to this point, you got a big decision to make. Because how much of this are you going to get from Big Ben until you realize we may need to start thinking about our future? If there is one team I'd call, if you want to make this right and maybe potentially get a quarterback to save your future, because they drafted quarterbacks, but they didn't stay long. Mason Rudolph, he's not going to win you games. Duck Hodges, you only have him on there because of the name, but he's not going to win you the games. The Jets are sitting at number 2. And if you can work out a deal, because I don't see the Jets really, like, in my opinion, I do not see them moving off of Sam Darnold that easily. So I'd give a call, find a way to jump yourselves up into that number 2 spot. You might have to give up a lineman. You might have to give up some picks. But in the end, you have your protected future there. And I can tell you, what's to say? Mac Jones, maybe he'd be a good fit for Pittsburgh. Maybe not. There are still other quarterbacks out there. But if I'm Pittsburgh, I'd be thinking about this right now. I would not be hesitating. Because up to this point, if you still want to be competitive in your division, I mean, Lamar Jackson, he just won his first playoff game this weekend. Then you have Baker Mayfield and Cleveland, that their run offense is absolutely magnificent and ridiculous. Oh, and let's not forget, Cincinnati, if they develop that offensive line, you want no part of Joe Burrow. You want absolutely no part of Joe Burrow. So you either make it or you break it. It's the way that I look at it with Pittsburgh. But when you're speaking about all of this, well, it's the Browns. You're just speaking nonsense because you refuse to admit the truths. And you'll pay the price for that. Because trust me, Philadelphia is paying a price. If you don't make this decision quick, Pittsburgh might pay the price. All right, coming up next, hockey season's right there around the corner. There's a lot to talk about within the divisions, what my thoughts are, of how I think this season's going to shape up, what we might actually expect. I think this is going to be it's going to be a fun season. And here also joining me as well will be Jeff Hammond, aka Hammer of Hammer's House, is going to be joining me here in just a moment, right after this short break. For all of you fantasy champions out there, far and wide, from West Coast to Midwest to the East Coast, wherever you may be, if you guys love playing fantasy sports, even esports, and you love winning cold hard cash, well, there is a spot here for you. It's called Thrive Fantasy. And Thrive Fantasy has a list, like a whole number wide amounts of winning cash in different plays, because the NBA is already kicking off, NHL is going to start kicking off, and we also have esports as well. When you go online to Thrive Fantasy, download the app and sign up. Use promo code SS Network. That's short for Spotlight Sports Network. When you deposit $20 into your first play, Thrive Fantasy always promises to match it to $50 in your first play. And how's that sound? You could be playing into pool plays that get you up to 15 grand. Sounds like a deal, don't it? Well, don't hesitate and don't wait. Definitely download. Sign up today at thrivefantasy.com. Promo code SS Network. That's thrivefantasy.com. Promo code SS Network.
What's up, fantasy champions? Spotlight Sports Network is excited to tell you about an amazing deal from Thrive Fantasy, your place for daily fantasy sports and esports. Right now, with promo code SS Network, Thrive Fantasy will match up to $50 of your first deposit. So go to thrivefantasy.com and sign up now with promo code SS Network. That's thrivefantasy.com, promo code SS Network.
All right.
But I know that's just in my mind. I know everything is just in my mind. Do you really want to be famous? Do you really want to be a superstar? Do you really want to get dangerous? Do you even know where the groupies are? Bitches out here be...
Welcome to Hammer's House.
You know, when the first time I ended up hearing this with our new intro, I had to think this was probably the best beat I've ever heard so far. I cannot wait for the new intro for Spotlight Sports Network to come out. But so as of right now, joining me here on the Snake Sports Talk Show via the Global Satellite Network, presented by StreamYard, is Jeff Hammond, aka Hammer, and he is the guy you go to at a place called Hammer's House, who gives you all the content from everything Raiders and everything Mets. So, Hammer, I know you are definitely excited for one with the Mets. The one that, because the big time trade, we'll get into that in momentarily, but I definitely want to break down the latest news that happened with the Las Vegas Raiders. So they decide to go with Gus Bradley as their defensive coordinator. Now, mind you, Gus Bradley in the last 3 years altogether, even this past season, he was ranked 3rd, 8th, and 14th in defense. Now, Gus has had his moments of being smart with the defensive play calling, but then as we saw things unravel from last season and the season prior, it just kind of seems like there's been some interesting looks. But in your perspective, when you heard the news, what do you think will change about the Raiders defense that has been something you've been speaking about for a while now, that you think Gus Bradley might bring to the table?
That's the thing. I'm not I'm not 100% sure. Like, when I heard about the signing, I kind of dropped a couple of F-bombs at the top of my lungs. I'm not going to do it on your show. But doing some reading, listening to the press conference today, more or less said all the right things, but it's like, you worked alongside Gruden before. And more or less, that's how you got your foot in the door. And number two, who's to say you're not going to be a yes man to him now? He clearly said at the end of the season-ending press conference that he still wants to continue the 4-3. Now, mind you, Gus Bradley's had experience as a head coach, defensive coordinator over years, was the architect of the Seattle Seahawks and that Legion of Boom from 2009 to 2012, where they heavily ran the cover 3, which they were very successful with, and had talent in Richard Sherman, just won
Byron Maxwell, and even
like that whole
Cam Chancellor,
Cam Chancellor, who one of my favorite defensive backs. Like those guys were something special, and they played by his calls, they played by his schemes, and they were successful with it. And we have a lot of young guys on defense, a lot of young and inconsistent guys on defense. Jonathan Abram, Damon Arnett, Trayvon Mullen, Cleve Farrell, Max Crosby. And that's just a few to name right now. Like, they need to step up this coming season. And we need to see exactly how much control of that defense is Gus Bradley really going to have.
Yeah, and you know what? It's interesting because, again, I think the Raiders, we know this whole, first season because there were an awful lot of expectations. And you and I have spoke about it. Of course, a couple of our colleagues have spoke about it. But obviously, you guys are tired of losing, and I get that. But it seemed like, the defense, because there were a lot of key additions initially when it came to the off season. And then all of a sudden you get into the middle of the season. It's just kind of like, well, this is not what we initially thought, looking at the blueprint, like this was going to unfold. And now, of course, you guys have had your reservations about Paul Gunther. Now Gunther was gone in the middle of the season, and you bring in Rod Marinelli to clean things up. And it still kind of seems like there are still things missing. So I think in my perspective, when I've watched Gus Bradley, because there were times where it felt like the defense is like, as far as in the front seven, I feel like are going to get a little more aggressive, especially when you got names like Max Crosby, Carl Nassib, and a couple of others that are there on that front line. But at the same time, the only thing that concerns me is how the secondary is going to be shaped, knowing that you have Jonathan Abram, who has to reshape his game in order to be a better secondary player, and not to mention, too, the amount of veterans that are there on the defensive side of the field. In this situation now, I mean, because the Raiders, of course, they got a lot to deal with in the division in the AFC West. Because knowing how to contain Justin Herbert, knowing how to contain Patrick Mahomes and that crazy offense, and then you also have the Denver Broncos. But as things have finished up, because let's be honest, John Gruden, we don't even know if he's actually going to be the big time piece that helps this Raiders team really win. But do you think somewhere down the road, the Raiders, if this thing don't work again, do you think Mark Davis really needs to have that sit-down talk with guys like Mike Mayock and the rest of the company and figure things out of what needs to happen for this Raiders team to be competitive?
Absolutely, especially after this coming season. If they are not a playoff contender, get deep in the playoffs this coming season, everybody's going to be coming out of the woodwork for Gruden's head. The $100 million man is a 500 head coach. It's not satisfying for us. There were some things that Gus Bradley said in the presser today, including how because obviously he's a defensive coordinator, so he sees a lot of their offense, was saying how he has seen a major change and evolve in the Raiders offense. And yes, they got weapons. They got Waller. They got Renfro. They got Jacobs. Ruggs. A terrible year. Dude had more fumbles than he did touchdowns. And there's little things that he needs to work on. Aguilar, I would love for them to re-sign him, but that defense is just abysmal. Like, you played the Falcons and Jets in back-to-back weeks and gave up over 400 rushing yards. Gunther should have been fired then.
Yeah.
And yet they kept him. Like, we started off the season 6-3 and finished 2-5. Come on. The last 2 years, you guys were in the hunt for the playoffs, and then at the end of the season, you shit the bed pretty much, and your playoff hopes are out the window. And here we are now, a week and 2 days after the regular season. They're sitting at home now, and a week and 2 days after the season ended, they have a new defensive coordinator. My thing was, who else did they interview for this spot? Because you and I spoke about it. I had 3 people in mind: Wade Phillips, Rex Ryan, Matt Patricia. Why do I feel like none of them even got remotely, like, one little text or a phone call for an interview?
Right, and then not to mention too, to add in that mix, Raheem Morris in the middle of it too as well. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because, you know, at the same time, this is a franchise that, you know, is trying to now push for a new look here in Las Vegas, because everything that they've had in the past in Los Angeles and Oakland, obviously that's all there in the past, and now trying to look into the future here in Las Vegas. I still think it's a process that's going to be built, and it's going to be built at the highest extent. But the question is, for how long will that take? And of course, a lot of Raider fans have been waiting for that. Here with me, Jeff Hammond, aka Hammer, here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. So my one big thing is, before we move on, is obviously the whole Derek Carr situation. You and I have had the conversations, and we've gone back and forth with, you know, what we saw with how Derek Carr played. I'm just going to tell you this. I think Derek Carr, outside of Tom Brady, there is nobody that I can think of who's had at least similar, or if not more, fourth quarter clutch comebacks, who's efficient when it comes to game is on the line and we need to score and we need to get the offense moving. Now, a lot of people seem to be having all of this pushback and stuff like what. This is where I try to get into, like, to the bottom of it, because obviously people are like, they're ready to move on. They're ready to move on from Derek Carr. They're ready for this and that. But I'm like, my thing is, it took the Raiders 14 quarterbacks to find the one quarterback. Do you think Derek Carr, with the way that things are shaping up on offense, do you think he's still capable enough that he could lead this Raiders team to the promised land? Or will somewhere down the road, the Raiders are going to have to look back at this and they feel like it must not be working? They may have to think of somebody else. Your thoughts?
I think the next year or two, that's what's going to happen. The next year or two is going to be the ultimate factor now, because even this past season, top 10 quarterback down the board pretty much in every single category.
Yeah.
From the time he broke his leg, and I believe it was 2016.
Yeah, it was actually like 2015, 2016.
He's been scared to break the pocket and run. And there's times where he has broken the pocket that he has terrible ball security, fumbles the ball. Like, he does these ridiculous dives and loses the ball. But I feel like he's not fully to blame right now, more or less, because Gruden liked him back when Gruden did a quarterback camp with him ages ago. And Gruden still has that old school West Coast short passing game offense where, like, you have weapons that can go deep and you're not throwing it deep that often. But I would say give it a year or two. The people that talk about Carr, mostly the Carr haters, the bandwagon fans, or people that just don't know football and haven't put on a pair of shoulder pads or a helmet a day in their life. But realistically, I say give him another year or two. The reason they brought Mariota in last season was to light a fire up Carr's ass for him to actually show and prove. And he did pretty damn well throughout the season. But it was, one, you weren't putting up enough points as an offense to win games, or when you did put up a decent amount of points, defense was keeping our opponents in the game. And a lot of times we would lose those games. So, I feel like it's a 50-50 thing between who's to who's really to blame? Actually, no, it's like a 33 between Carr, Gruden, and the Raiders defense.
Yeah, I mean, and I totally agree because, at the same time, because ultimately it's who are you asking to put more of the workload on? Are you asking the offense now to have to be an overpowering offense that has to score 40 plus points a game? Or are you asking the defense to be shut down as possible, pressure up the quarterback, make the pocket uncomfortable, and for the secondaries to just be all shut down, no fly zone type of defense? Because at the end of the day, if you get the right people in the right places who balance this out, I mean, ultimately it's a pendulum effect, because if the pendulum is one side over the other, these are the results you're going to end up getting. I mean, we see this with certain teams. But if you play the cards well enough, you add the right key additions, hopefully it's what will help to balance the pendulum that could make this team a lot better, and who knows, even punch their ticket back into the playoffs and be a complete threat in the playoffs that people don't even think of. But and this is my last thing before we move on, but you did mention about the struggle with Henry Ruggs in his rookie year. And yes, there were times where it felt like Henry Ruggs couldn't fit into the system right away. And sometimes that does happen with certain rookies. There's some that don't really establish to the playbook right away, and there are some that just it just comes naturally to them. And my question to you is, looking at how we see with Henry Ruggs and with all these wide receivers that the Raiders have or have acquired, do you think there may be a bounce back year for Henry Ruggs, and maybe somewhere in the middle of the offseason that the Raiders and Ruggs could both end up working toward to maybe possibly boost up his potentials for the 2021 season?
I hope there's a bounce back year for him, but also I want to see Bryan Edwards a lot more involved in the offense. Dude is a big body wideout who we saw towards the end of the season make things happen. I know he got injured earlier in the season, but he was a prospect going into the draft last year, like 2 months before the draft at least. It was one dude I was looking at, and I was like, we need a weapon like this. And they got him. Ruggs, he was not the receiver I wanted. I actually wanted CeeDee Lamb, and I probably hear it from Raider fans all the time, but at the same time, there was a method to Mayock's madness, and I tell people this all the time. The reason that we got Ruggs instead of these other guys and Judy and Lamb was the Chiefs were looking to trade up. They were going to trade up and get Ruggs because they knew Sammy Watkins. They were not going to retain Watkins. He's now, once the season's over, he's going to be a free agent. Now imagine if they traded up and got Ruggs, and you had Hill on one side and Ruggs on the other. That would just be scary.
Yeah, and not to mention so much speed on that offense. Yep. Oh, Lord.
Mayock, there was a method to the madness, and it was to prevent the Chiefs from getting a hold of him. So it is what it is. I hope he does have a bounce back. He definitely needs to get his strength up, especially after that one shot that he took in the last game against the Broncos. But I'm definitely hoping he has a bounce back season next year.
Jeff Hammond, a.k.a. Hammer, on Hammer's House here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. So let's talk about baseball, my friend, because you and I, we're big-time baseball fanatics. We just can't wait for the next season to come around. Obviously, you've had a big day. You've been smiling an awful lot because of the fact of the New York Mets made the biggest decision under the Steve Cohen era, where they go and acquire two big names, Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco. When I saw the trade, the Mets organization, after all these years, they're not messing around this time. Because, listen, I love Pete Alonso. I think he's probably going to be the biggest it factor for the Mets. There are a couple of youngsters that are there that need to develop and I think are going to get better as time rolls on. But my one biggest key thing is with how this rotation is going to favor and how the bullpen is going to step up. So let's start with the Francisco Lindor acquisition. Give me your perspective. The second you heard the news that the Mets officially traded for him, What was the big thing that you think is going to turn things around for the Mets?
Having having a switch hitter that's great on defense at the shortstop position, something we haven't had in quite some time. The fact that Lindor actually had better numbers in every single category than any Met shortstop we've had in the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big name. It was something we needed to do to bolster this team, to bolster this lineup. And honestly, this is the biggest trade the Mets have made since trading for Mike Piazza in 2000. I was 12 years old, so that was 1998.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's definitely something I've been very happy about these last few days, especially with the addition of his teammate from Cleveland, pitcher Carlos Carrasco as well. But we knew something big was going to come from the time that Steve Cohen finally bought the team from the Wilpons. Thank goodness. We knew change was coming, especially with his first press conference and introduction as a new Mets owner. He said he wasn't going to spend too much, but he wasn't going to spend for the wrong reasons or the wrong players either. And we saw that with the Wilpons, with guys like Jason Bay, guys like Yoenis Cespedes, and others. Like when he became.
I mean, hell, the only one that I can even think of too was that contract they gave to Johan Santana.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
Like the day that he was introduced as a new owner, I was shouting up and down, "It's a new day," and you know what? I couldn't be happy. I've been a Met fan since I was since '86. I was 9 months old when they won their last World Series. Then Carrasco as well. Carrasco he missed the 2019 season with he was diagnosed with leukemia.
Mm-hmm.
Came back last year. Numbers were pretty solid, but overall, the guy is a really good pitcher, and he actually has already put in. I guess he's in Mr. Cohen's ear a little bit. Mm-hmm. He made a pitch, pun intended, for the Mets to try to get Trevor Bauer or Corey Kluber in the rotation as well for the Mets. And this is a quote directly from Carlos Carrasco from the presser today. I'd be really happy to see Trevor Bauer or Corey Kluber in this rotation. I spent a lot of time with Mike Clevenger, who's now, I believe, a Padre. Mm-hmm. Trevor Bauer, Corey Kluber, a lot of those teammates. Carrasco said, I'd be really happy to see one of those two guys in the Mets uniform. They are really good pitchers. Now, just imagine if they were added to the rotation as well.
Yeah, you can just imagine that. I mean, listen, I love Jacob deGrom, and I mean, listen, I have my thoughts on Steven Matz. I mean, it seemed like initially he looked like he was going to acclimate as a low end of the rotation type of guy that I think, is as a fourth or fifth starter. He was going to be a guy that was going to stabilize the rest of the rotation, because ultimately, if your first two, if not three guys are on point, then at the very least, you can have stabilizing guys who, like, it's basically like a Jenga block. You could fit them into those positions, and it would help to stabilize the rotation moving forward until, rinse and repeat. Now you go back to your first three starters again. So I like the acquisition with Carlos Carrasco. I think it does bring a lot of stability as far as you could utilize him as a 2 or a 3 starter and then finish the rest from the low end. But I still think that would be incredible if you had Trevor Bauer or if you had Corey Kluber in the middle of that rotation. But of course, think about the injuries that Kluber's had lately. It is going to be very interesting to see how he pitches well. But if all things go well, I think that could be interesting for the Mets. But even for looking for Trevor Bauer, because you have to think about it. The Dodgers are worried about one thing. They are worried about the thing is because San Diego made all these moves. They go and get players. They're stacking up. They're beefing up. And, of course, my one thought is because of the emergence of Fernando Tatis Jr. That's the only thing that I can think of. You got a kid who's transformative, a guy that, could be the face of baseball in the future. They're going to go with that potential. Now, it would be interesting, but if this does play right, do we consider the Mets that if they go and get Trevor Bauer and they basically bolster this rotation, do we see them being big-time threats in the NL East, knowing they have to face up against the Atlanta Braves?
I spoke to Michael Kay on his show on ESPN New York the other day, the day that the trade happened, and I went down with the lineup, the projected lineup, but I also threw in George Springer if we happen to get him, but I don't think at this point it's going to happen. I think we're better off pivoting for Jackie Bradley, the outfield position, but like Francisco Lindor, Michael Conforto, Pete Alonso, Dominic Smith, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, JD Davis, and James McCann as a starting lineup. The rotation, I don't think Thor's going to be back until late in the season after recovering from Tommy John. So right now, with the addition of Carlos Carrasco, you got Jacob deGrom, Carlos Carrasco, Marcus Stroman, Steven Matz, and David Pederson, which honestly I would swap and put David Pederson as a number 4 over Matz. But honestly, at this point, right now, we are the Mets, that is. They are World Series contenders. I feel if they were to get another bat and bolster up that bullpen, whether it being George Springer if we happen to land him, or Jackie Bradley Jr. if we happen to land him, and try to get some bullpen help. I think if we get those pieces, then we'll be certified World Series contenders. Definitely.
Wow. Yeah, and you know what? I mean, because you have to think about it. The NL, there's a bunch of teams right now that's knocking up on the door. But in my one biggest perspective, because, I mean, for me, I've been a diehard baseball fan ever since by birth. I mean, I played the game. I've watched the game. What we witnessed last year and how things were shaped up. Now, I'm sure you've got your reservations about Commissioner Rob Manfred. I did myself too. And my one biggest thing is when last year happened, because number one, the pandemic was not planned. It was not planned at all. It was something that just occurred, and we're trying to acclimate and we're trying to make the most of it as best as we could. And right now, from what I'm hearing on news, is that teams, they're informing them to be prepared for spring training, and they're going to move on with a 162 game season. When you when we take us to when you watched how the season unfold, what were some of the positives that came out of this from last year's shortened season, and some of the cons as well? And what perspectives what do we see with this next season shaping up that could be better than what last season we took from it?
I was excited with how they split the divisions last year and how that ran throughout the season. It was very, very interesting and very fun to watch. The universal DH, I definitely think they need to keep that in Major League Baseball. That would definitely be a major thing for certain teams in the National League as well. Like, I know some of the Mets have a few pitchers that can hit. Well, really one pitcher can hit, and that's deGrom. And Thor just a little bit. But the one thing I really was not too big on was the whole extra inning crap with the, you have a runner on second base, and that, like, it's not.
Yeah, I never saw the point of that. I mean, listen, I understand that if it's a regular season thing, you know what I mean, and just to at least speed the pace of the game through the season. But I would never want to see that get implemented into postseason, because it's postseason for a reason. You and I, you and I have experienced it. When postseason baseball comes around the corner, forget about the season, forget about everything that we've learned through it. It's postseason baseball. Anything can happen from there, and we have to bring our A game. Those are pressure situations, and that's what shows the best of all teams. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think that the extra runner, I mean, it's almost like in hockey. You know, hockey, they have the shootout. They have the shootout after an overtime is done. And then, but when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoffs, you keep playing
a million overtimes until somebody finally actually scores a goal.
Exactly. But of course, the whole point of that is to build pressure and even boost the adrenaline up because it's so close. And everybody like myself is just glued to the television, waiting for something to happen at just one pitch at a time or one shot at a time.
Absolutely.
And that's my kind of thing. But I'm with you on that. But what was your thought? Did it seem like with the shortened season, like what was your perspective on that? Because to me, I was kind of pissed with Major League Baseball and even with the commissioner because I think it's ridiculous that players and owners were bickering back and forth about the whole money deal. I understand that with as far as player safety because the risks of catching the virus, injuring themselves, I understand that. And then for the owners, of course, they're trying to run a Fortune 500 company and they're trying to keep the lights on in the building. But the only people I felt for during this time were definitely the people that worked in the concessions because they relied on fans. They're the ones that they bring the entertainment, they bring the food, the drinks, and it's all about the experience.
Right.
And not having that, I felt more for them. So I felt like this whole thing with the bickering, it's like, guys, you're not going to get paid either way if you're not on the field. So what were your thoughts from the shortened season and what were the benefits behind that?
I really didn't see any benefits behind it. It was difficult. It was upsetting. It was frustrating, especially when you hear owners and players crying and complaining about money. This is something you grew up. This is something you grew up doing. This is something that you're doing for a job now. You should be thankful and privileged to be doing that. And to cry about money and this, that, and the third, like the season being short and it was hard, especially like thinking about how these guys are going to perform in such little time, who's going to stay healthy and who's not. Like, look at Giancarlo Stanton, look at Aaron Judge, like they couldn't even survive a full 60 game regular season.
Oh dear God, no.
And I knew it was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen. I think a lot of people knew that was going to happen, but especially now that you're saying like they're supposed to be prepared to report to camp, and pitchers and catchers report in a month.
Oh yeah.
And for them to be playing 162 regular season games now, like how is this going to be done? Are you guys going to have fans? Are the players going to have the vaccine? Because we look at the NBA right now, and they're playing, I think, 10 less games than they normally do in a regular season. And you're already getting games postponed due to players getting COVID, teams that can't have at least 8 guys to play to have a game played. Like, what are the safety measures? What are the precautions that MLB, the owners, and the players are taking right now for that? Are we using our home stadiums? Are we going to do a bubble? What is going on? What are the parameters right now? And what are you guys going to do to make this season be run the correct way? I know we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but how is this going to be run successfully?
Yeah, and I think from what I'm being told, they are going to be playing in their home stadiums after all. They are going to end up playing in their home stadiums. And I will say this, because me initially, like what pissed me off even with the bickering back and forth because of the whole money deal, because ultimately these players get paid so much money just to be playing their one position. That's the one thing that boggles my mind. Like, listen, if you told me right now you want me to play right field for $1 million, hell yeah, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it because, number one, you're paying me $1 million to play one position. I'm going to be in the gym at least, it's 5 times a week, and I'm going to end up working my tail off just to ensure that, again, the money was well spent.
Shit, but somebody can hire me now to be a bullpen catcher, and I'd take that shit and run.
Hell yeah, absolutely. Like, come on, who are we fooling here? But, when I looked at this, because initially I'm not sure with the 162 games, especially with all of the outcomes that's been happening all from last year and this year. I felt like what's reasonable, because when you look at hockey, when you look at basketball, they're initially playing at least maybe 80 games a season, right? Yep. My thing is, I felt like baseball, could have played 90 to about 100 games and then just butchered the 62. And what you could do is you could split 50-50 to where it'll either be you have some that are, close within the region type of matchups, right? And you could even end up playing interleague games and then continuously play because obviously the whole point is to play more within your division. Right. That's the one thing. And then, of course, playing a few fun games like marquee matchups. I just feel like baseball, they just do not get so much of like these like how football does, because obviously the NFL is king. They get these primetime games and they boost them up. I want to see more Red Sox versus Yankees matchup. I want to see more Dodgers versus Giants matchup. And in interleagues, I want to see more Subway Series matchups. I want to see more of because initially what I think of when it comes to broadcasting and when it comes to generating money, like money revenue, I feel like games like that is what will bring the attention. And it just doesn't seem like baseball is kind of on the same page with that. And even when they mentioned, what's the one slogan that we were told? Let the kids play. The hell why are we not doing that? Because listen, if a kid's got cleats to show, let him wear it. If a kid's got, a custom glove, let him wear it. And if a kid's let them play ball, because initially it's a kid's sport, isn't it?
They don't want, like, I don't know. I swear, man.
Because my thought is we're not here to change tradition. Tradition will always carry on until, I don't know, when the universe explodes at one point. But what we're trying to do is we're just trying to make it better. We're just trying to make the tradition better. We ain't looking to change nothing with this, because tradition will always be tradition, but we want to make it better. We want to make it fun. We want to make it entertaining where people are going to watch it more often. Of course, because to be honest, nobody really pays attention to the season until the postseason happens. That's usually how that works.
It also depends on your demographic and your region as well, because there's certain regions where baseball is still a really popular sport, especially to watch or go to games and stuff. But I feel like Manfred is just as bad as Roger Goodell with not letting these guys and mostly kids have fun with it. You guys frown at the bat flip and want to take people's heads off. You can't wear
or swinging at 3-0 with bases loaded.
You can't wear custom cool cleats or can't do custom gloves and stuff. Why?
Right. And initially it's that's what drives the viewers away. You know what I mean? And I can't even begin to tell you. I'm not even going to get into the full description. But when I heard about that 3-0 swing, that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in all the years I played and watched baseball. I've never heard anybody complain as much. And then your own manager to tell you that, I've never heard of that. My big thing is, listen, I play adult softball, and I play with a good group of guys. The biggest thing is you either don't throw me a low and outside pitch or don't cry when that ball comes right back where it came from, because that's what's going to happen. If you're not prepared when you throw a low and outside pitch, don't even bother throwing it, because initially it's going to come back the same way it came. And that's just, you can't complain, but honestly, that's just kind of how the way that baseball is for you. And it's just a point where it's just get politics out of it, get all this. That's why I'm even you mentioned it. It's like a participation trophy. Every time when we get participation trophies, man, it pisses me off. And it's this is not how you're supposed to teach your kids. Come on.
It's the only other thing that's driving me crazy when it comes to baseball, because I grew up playing the game from the time I was 3 years old. I had the opportunity to play single A ball in Florida about, what are we in, 2021? So 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe even longer than that, 2006 to 2008. This whole thing now where the front offices, I don't want to say the owners particularly, but it's mostly just the front office and GMs are on this whole analytics stick. And like, this is another reason why you don't see a lot of certain managers in the game anymore, or why they're going with these other guys like these yes men. Small ball is tradition,
Yes.
not analytics. And this shit drives me insane. Anytime I hear anybody talk about analytics, I can spew out stats and numbers and stuff. And I hate if somebody tries to refer to me as Mr. Analytics, because I'm not that person. I just know the game.
Same.
But when it comes to, you want to put this person in this position, or you want to do this, that, and the third, because this one hits these numbers, play the game.
Or
stop
this one
pitches math. This is baseball. This isn't math. Cut the shit.
Right. Yeah. Same. Like that. Or this pitcher in a certain situation, he's been so successful. I'm like, no.
Blake Snell.
Yep.
Say no more.
Or how about the many times we've seen Dave Roberts pull off his antics when it comes to Clayton Kershaw? Like, good God. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting season. But I totally feel with you on that, because initially the season will always be the season. But when it comes to postseason baseball, I don't care about analytics. I don't care about statistics. All I care about is, we're in this moment. Let me control. It's a game of chess. Let me control the board. Let me, at the very least, play the right moves in order for us, because initially we're all just trying to win. We're all trying to outmanage the opposing team, because when you've got one manager over the other, you're hoping that you play your moves and then checkmate from there. That's ultimately what it is. So, but it's gonna be a fun season, my friend, and I'm really excited for what baseball has to offer. But at the same time, I mean, we're seeing all of these kids now it's become so much younger now than versus what it used to be. Because I mean, from what you and I used to grow up on, if you didn't have a superstar player, your franchise was never going to win games. Yep. And now it's evolutionized to where, hey, now you're working through your farm system. You're working on the next up-and-coming thing. But it is going to be interesting. But initially, like we mentioned about Trevor Bauer, and like we mentioned about Corey Kluber, and of course so many others. In the National League, because it's now started to become competitive, and I'm pushing for the universal DH rule as well. But what are some teams that you feel like for the Mets, before we wrap this up, who are you thinking that the Mets are going to have the toughest competition against in the National League?
Well, I'll just start with the division first and go with the Braves. They've won the division the last 3 years straight. They still have a great team over there. Phillies, I don't know if they're even planning on re-signing JT Realmuto. If not, I feel like they're just going to continue to go downhill. Harper, he wanted money, so you left the team that you grew up playing for more money, and you're looking beyond overrated now in a Phillies uniform, and you can take that however you want. Yeah. Washington, I think that they are them and the Marlins obviously are at the back of the pack there. Other teams in the National League right now, obviously the Dodgers have been just grinding, and they had, I don't know if they still do now, they had a very, very deep farm system to make all these moves they've had over the past couple of months. It was like almost every single day I was hearing or getting a new ESPN alert about the Padres doing this, that, and third. I was like, oh my God. The NL West better watch out. Dodgers, obviously. And I tell people this all the time. The Dodgers originally, obviously, for those that actually know baseball, originally are from Brooklyn. So the Dodgers have a piece of me just because of their rich history and tradition, even being in LA. I think that they're going to be another team in the NL that is going to be another tough team this year. Obviously, they are going to be the World Series defending champions this year. It's going to be interesting to see. But those teams, I can't really say too many others from the NL right now besides those three, because those three are the biggest ones to talk about right now going into the season.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, kind of looking for, throughout the National League. I mean, obviously the Padres are making moves, and you know what's kind of funny about this because for me in a baseball background, my great grandfather, God rest his soul, every time he always told me, "Watch out for the Padres. Watch out for the Padres." Like it's like, and then all of a sudden here comes Fernando Tatis Jr. And then I see how this team started to jump. I'm like, was this what he meant the whole time? Because it's just the fact that they get this transformative talent. And I love Eric Hosmer, man. I love his play style and his play days in Kansas City.
Yep.
And I think he's a very valuable piece. I'm not sure what I'm going to get with Will Myers, but when his stick is red hot, he's a good hitter. And listen, let's be honest. I mean, I'm off and on when it comes to Manny Machado, but I just get to this point where I'm just like, good Lord. Like, he's the type of person that you love and hate at the same time. You love the fact that he has a ridiculous stick, but you hate his attitude.
Oh, his attitude is piss poor. He's like
oh my God, it sucks.
I wonder if him and Wentz might be related in some way, shape, or form. Maybe. Whatever the case,
maybe. But I mean, yeah, and you know what? I mean, the Dodgers, the obvious thing is when you look at Los Angeles, you're either making or breaking. I mean, the Lakers go and get LeBron James, and the only way to fulfill that was going and getting Anthony Davis. Then they're the top notch, in LA. And then you look at the Dodgers, they're like, oh, hell, we need to keep up. We're going to get Mookie Betts. And then you sign him for a 12 to 13-year contract. It's like, Jesus Christ. Now the Dodgers are they're overloaded with talent, and that's what's going to be difficult to play in the National League. But
you know what? That's what happened when they got the new ownership and everything. Right away, they turned everything around. And that's what I'm hoping, and that's what I see the Mets doing with Cohen. Cohen is from Long Island. Cohen grew up a lifelong Met fan. He had a small ownership in the Mets organization, and he tried getting them before, and things went south last season. A couple of months later, he was able to get the team. So he's definitely building for the future. And he said he wants them to win a World Series within the next 3 to 5 years. That's his plan. The move that he made just the other day, I feel like he's trying to win right now. And Lindor, in his press conference, I believe the press conference was yesterday, he's excited to be a Met. He hasn't talked about the extension, but he did say once spring training hits, he won't be talking about it. He hoped that they will try to come to some type of terms or whatever. He's got a little girl that he said he would love for her to grow up in New York. He's dying to have New York pizza, but who isn't?
Yeah, right. I mean, listen, I've been in the
One thing I'm hoping for is there are fans at some type of capacity. Yeah. I know this sounds selfish, and people can take it how they want. Like, I feel like the vaccine is out. I know it's out for a select few, but I feel like if you have the vaccine, you should be able to go to it. I haven't been to me not going to Citi Field for a year is weird because I go to at least 10 games a year. If I decide to go through and get that vaccine shot, I would like to be at Citi Field a couple times this season.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? I mean, listen, I've told you before, I've got family out there in New York, out there in Long Island, and like I said, I love myself a good slice of pizza. I do love, the scenery and a bunch of places. I mean, listen, I'll go either to, Montauk right on the tip, or I'll go to Port Jeff. I'll go to anywhere that's got the best scenery up out there, man. I've walked Times Square multiple times, and love being up out there. But what's interesting, though, is that, and I've said this before, I felt like the city of New York, and you've basically been there throughout your whole life, but it felt like the city of New York to me needed juice, and it needed serious juice, because the last time I was out there, it just seemed like people were pretty pissed off. People were just, it's like they're upset like 24/7. I don't see any positivity in the city of New York most of the time. And it's just like, what's the deal? Because obviously you had the Yankees right now that, like, they get injury plagued. They ain't win championships. You got the Mets who kind of feel like they were just irrelevant. And then don't even get me started with the Knicks. And then you got, the only teams that are really kind of holding it together, in my opinion, feel like it's the New York Rangers and the New York Highlanders.
And And it's more the Islanders than the Rangers the last few years, because the Rangers have been in this rebuild mode. The Knicks, obviously, their ownership is a joke in the Dolans, and I could care less how Dolan feels about me saying you're the worst owner in the NBA. You need to just sell this team. You banned me from the Garden. I really don't give a boop. The Mets, yeah, they had terrible ownership as well with the Wilpons. I was calling them the ESPN Radio New York on a regular basis. They knew me by name. I was telling them, these things need to change. This needs to happen. Da 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 da. Look, we got a new owner. Thank God. Now things will be looking better, and we're not going to be back page news for the wrong reasons anymore, or the laughing stock of New York. And right now, it seems like since apparently the Mets, there's still 3 teams that are in talks with DJ LeMahieu, and that's the Mets, the Blue Jays, and the Dodgers. All of a sudden, conversations have re-engaged with LeMahieu and those 3 teams. So it's a bidding war for him. I guess he wasn't too thrilled with whatever the Yankees offer was, but the new talk right now is like the Mets, if they keep spending like this, they're going to become the new evil empire of New York City, and just have to wait and see what happens.
Imagine that. I mean, you really think, like Brian Cashman and the Steinbrenners, I mean, seriously, you really think they're going to roll that easily? If that's the case, oh man.
I guarantee you if George Steinbrenner was still alive, this stuff wouldn't be going on with the Yankees right now.
No, and I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, my God, when it came to George Steinbrenner, it was just like, is this, is that? Like he kind of just knew the places.
No nonsense no nonsense attitude, and got what he wanted and made things happen.
Yeah, and with zero caps, like with zero salary cap. Like it's like everything just flowed with the Yankees.
That's the best thing about not having a cap. You can spend as much as you want, but you also have to worry about that luxury tax. And BL asks who's going to pay into the luxury tax this year, the Mets or the Dodgers. The Mets, Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, already said he wasn't planning on doing that. I have a feeling that most likely will be the Dodgers.
Yeah, and what's funny, what BL said over here, California don't need 5 baseball teams. But I'll be honest with you, BL, I've been saying this. You've even heard me say this. But at some point, I feel like I'm going to see the Athletics go to Vegas. I'm going to see the A's go to Vegas because listen, Oakland is an absolute, it's an absolute dumpster fire. The only money they're really generating out of is in Alameda. That's it. Yep. They couldn't retain the Raiders. They couldn't even keep Golden State right there in the middle.
That was all the county's fault. I lived through that when I was playing minor league ball. The county that I lived in down in Florida, they didn't want to help in giving us a new stadium. So it was like, all right, we're moving to Arizona. Mm-hmm. Baltimore Orioles ended up getting a hold of the facility. They revamped the entire ballpark, and it actually looks like a minor league version of Camden. I was there 3 years ago now, and the stadium looks absolutely amazing. Like, I don't get what's wrong with these people. If you know it's going to create more revenue and get more job opportunities, why would you not contribute? Why would you not help? Look at Long Island now. The Islanders are getting a new arena that is made specifically for hockey.
And
I just drove by it today. It's right next to Belmont Racetrack. I can't wait to get inside that building once it opens. I'm so excited to see what it's going to look like. But like the people that live in these areas that are trying to get new ballparks and everything, why not help in, like, it's tax money. It's not that big a deal, but like, why not want to approve something like that to generate more revenue and generate more jobs for people, especially in times like this right now? Come on.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, think about it. You talk about the concession people, they're looking for gigs. Think about it this way. I mean, even with the pandemic shutdown, look at you, look at me, look at like all these other guys, all these other podcasters and live streamers. Who wouldn't want the gig to at some point be in the middle of broadcasting where they're in a new building? They're enjoying they're kind of sinking in the whole feeling of, man, I am in this building. It's gorgeous. I mean, for God's sakes, man. I mean, the Islanders getting in. I can't even begin to tell you how many stories I was told from my mother, who's gone to years ago when she remembered going to Islander games at the Coliseum. Like, oh my God,
Yeah,
and this is in the 80s.
I've had so many experiences at the Nassau Coliseum growing up. I went to a bunch of Monster Jams. I went to when there was arena football here, the New York Dragons. I went to a bunch of their games. I even tried out for the New York Dragons when I was 19 years old. A handful of Islander games, including one on my birthday, where Alex Ovechkin broke Jake Hillen's jaw with a slap shot. That was like the best birthday present ever. I refused to go to Barclays for a hockey game. From everything I had heard, the dimensions, the view, it was trash. That's exactly why once the Coliseum was renovated, they went right back there. I went to Barclays for 2 net games and 2 Monday Night Raws. I would refuse to ever go to Barclays for a hockey game. Not even the same. Like, a hockey in Brooklyn? What? What?
That's totally unheard of. Like, oh man. Well, I don't blame you there. I mean, God, I could never imagine seeing hockey in Brooklyn at all, especially with its histories of baseball, bits and pieces of basketball. But good God, I would never imagine that. I can't even picture it in my mind. Like, so. You're too good to be sitting at 250. Shout out to BL. Shout out to Valhalla Sports Talk. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate everybody here up in chats as well. It's good talking with you, Hammer. I mean, listen, I'm at some point I'm trying to make my way back out there to New York again. I mean, hey, I may even plan somewhere. Like, listen, if we get fans back up into the stands at some point, I would love to actually catch a hockey game down in MSG, man. I'd love to catch it up in Madison Square Garden, watching the Rangers playing the Vegas Golden Knights, man. I mean, my first ever hockey game when I watched the Vegas Golden Knights here was actually against the New York Rangers, believe it or not. Yeah, and I cannot begin to tell you, and this was a time when the nor'easter hit, and how many New Yorkers stayed in Vegas for good reasons, and at least for good excuses. They were like, listen, there's a nor'easter hitting. My business told me I could not come back to work until everything cleared up. You know what I mean? I'm like, that's the best excuse you could ever have.
Absolutely.
But man, my first experience, I don't know what the Rangers fans were chanting. And it had to deal with the refs and the line judges. But I thought it was absolutely hilarious. Like, I could not stop laughing the rest of the game. But again, what can you say about New Yorkers? They're very enthusiastic people. And I love a little bit of comedy. So
we're just different. That's the best way to put us. We're just different, and this is coming from somebody born and raised on Long Island, somebody that lives in the Bronx now. But I'll tell you one thing, because you're talking about going to Manhattan, going to Montauk, going to Port Jeff.
Yep.
This pandemic is over, and you get the opportunity to come to Long Island. I got a spot in my hometown. I have to take you down, and you're gonna have a blast. And if anybody that's in here right now knows me and is from Long Island, they know exactly where I'm talking about, and that's the Nautical Mile in Freeport. And bro, we'll just be kicking back, drinking, and just enjoying the view out there. I'll tell you right now.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, hell, even save ourselves a slice of pizza or seafood. I mean, listen, I went to that chowder house up out there in Montauk, and I can't begin to tell you what my experience was with that. I thought it was absolutely amazing, man.
I think I need to try to reach out to Francisco Lindor personally and tell him I'll go to that pizza shop. Remember the one I went on the rant a couple weeks ago? I went to grab pizza that night. I'll go to that shop and get a huge pie and bring it to Lindor, whether it being his front door or Citi Field. But
there you go.
Your first New York slice is on me, bro.
Hey, there you go. Hey, even spare up a little black and white cookie there for you. How's that sound?
There you go.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for coming on with me here, Hammer. Appreciate you coming on. Where can all of my fans here in the chat find you?
Check me out on YouTube. I'm at Hammer's house. We're gonna have to try to find that link and put it in if we possibly can. But yeah, the love and support would really mean a lot. We're trying to get to at least I'm still a couple shy of 100 subscribers, and I definitely would like to change this URL finally so it actually matches with Hammer's house. But it's been real. This is something that we talked about doing for a while. From the time you and I first met, I was like, we have to do something, a podcast together, and just chop it up about all our sports and everything. I definitely appreciate you throwing me on tonight, bro.
Absolutely. And there you go, folks. I got the channel right here up for you guys. You guys could definitely check it out. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell button for all latest notifications. Of course, Hammer always does have his weekend morning show as well that you guys can definitely check out, especially when it comes to fantasy fanatics up out there. If you guys need to sit him or start him, definitely check out Hammer at Hammer's house as well. So yeah, man, like I said, I'm looking forward to more episodes like this, man, and I'd love to bring you back on at some point soon. And like I said, man, it's going to be a fun season. I can't wait for it to start up. But hey, who knows? Maybe Lindor will definitely love the pizza and the black and white cookie, man. You never know, but I think he'll love the taste of New York in no time.
Hell yeah. For everybody that is in here, continue to stay safe during these crazy times. And most importantly, wash your hands and your asses. I'm out.
All righty. Take care, Hammer. Well, there you go, guys. Jeff Hammond, a.k.a. Hammer of Hammer's house, man. Listen, I could go on. I'm literally like already at an hour 22, already up and in here. My God, I'm like, I could go on for days. I could go on for hours, man. It's always good. It's always good talking with certain people. But you know what? I mean, think about it. Like, you have to think about it that New York seriously needed some juice. And maybe the Mets are the difference makers. And I think this is exactly what the state of New York needs. Because we're already getting the Buffalo, like we're already getting upstate of New York, Buffalo, that they're finally being competitive in New York. The Rangers and Islanders, they've made some changes, but the Islanders had made more of the impact in the hockey world. And the Yankees, the only thing you're hoping for is that this injury bug goes away, because it's like nobody knows how to stay healthy out there in the Bronx. But hopefully Queens, I mean, they got something. They got something in the cards. But I mean, it's a great day to be a Met fan for sure. All right, I'm going to take a slight break, but when I do come back, I'm actually going to be discussing a little bit more on hockey, and then not to mention Buffalo doesn't count for us true New Yorkers. That's the stakes. That's true. That's absolutely true. I mean, listen, it's either island or upstate and stuff like that. I mean, listen, it's like you're choosing your type of coffee, right? I mean, my God, I'm like, listen, I don't know about you, but if I'm coming up out there, the last thing you want to hear me say is, hey, can I have some Tim Hortons? Can I have some Tim Hortons coffee? Because you know what? I went on upstate and I said, I gotta have Tim Hortons. All right, we're gonna take say coffee. You want coffee? This is what's the fun thing about having family in New York. Every time I come up out there. All right, let me take a quick break, and we'll definitely be back with more here on the Snake Sports Talk Show.
to the My City, My Game pod show featuring Raider J77, your place for all things Raiders and all things Trailblazers. Brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Now let's go.
Well, there's all the shows that you guys can end up checking on here on the Spotlight Sports Network when it comes to Key in the Building, who has all of your Philadelphia contents, Sixers, Flyers, Phillies, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Definitely check out Key in the Building. Of course, my good friend, John Francis, a.k.a. Raider J, at My City, My Game. For Trailblazers and Raiders content, definitely check him out. And Gangrene David with his contents as well for everything New York Jets. Oh, man, I tell you, it's great talking with Jeff Hammond, a.k.a. Hammer. I mean, listen, I'm just as excited for baseball season as he is, but it's interesting. The Mets, they could be difference makers. They're knocking on the doors. The Padres are knocking on the doors. The Dodgers got a lot to handle with. But, all right, here's what I will say about this. I'm excited for hockey tomorrow night. And it's going to be very interesting how the season's going to start up and where it's going to take place. Because last year, everything seemed like everything was running smoothly. Then the pandemic hits. And it causes everything to go into a stop. Then they figure it out. They now have a bubble in place. And yet still, they were absolutely spot on. But the problem of it is now is the money situation. And this is where they're trying to figure out how they're going to get the money back in revenue. And they got sponsorships, they got all of this and that. But tomorrow I think is going to be fun. You got the Pittsburgh Penguins, you got a bunch of these teams that are ready to go, even the Philadelphia Flyers. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, I may be on tomorrow to doing the play-by-play commentary to kick things off for hockey here on the Spotlight Sports Network. And again, I cannot wait for it. I can't wait for Golden Knights content to start coming up. If you guys haven't seen it, I did upload my first ever Golden Knights content and getting more of the uploads because I just think there are going to be a bunch of teams that are going to be very competitive. Tampa Bay is going to be in a position where they're trying to retain their Stanley Cup champion reign, and there are a bunch of teams knocking on the door. Colorado, the Golden Knights, there's a bunch more, and I'm really excited for what this season brings. But I just think that what we got from last season and where we're going into this season. Now, all the teams are going back to their home arenas. I'm excited for that because I've been hearing nothing but crickets down the street at T-Mobile Arena, and I'm excited for the Golden Knights to be back. But ultimately, hockey, for those that are not big-time hockey fans, I mean, as far as and for as long as the tradition goes. What's going on, Jay in the Bay? Shout out to Jay in the Bay here in San Francisco for all the 49ers content. Definitely check him out. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell button. But I'm excited for this. I'm very excited for it. I think we are going to get an awful lot of, we're going to get a lot of close-end games. And I think I'm going to be excited for tomorrow. So definitely check me out here on the Spotlight Sports Network when we got some content here. So definitely time now for the Hot Press.
The Hot Press.
All right, so we had a lot of news here that has gone down. So obviously, the Las Vegas Raiders have announced their defensive coordinator, and it's going to be Gus Bradley. So Gus Bradley, who served as the defensive coordinator for the last couple of seasons for the LA Chargers, Chargers defense was 3rd, 8th, and 14th in the last couple of years he's been a defense coordinator. He was also a former head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars and was a defense coordinator who was a part of that Legion of Boom team years ago with Pete Carroll. I think this is interesting. Now, the Raiders had some tough breaks. The defense started to fall apart, and it didn't seem like things were kind of going according to plan. Now, of course, part of that was Paul Gunther. I get it. But bringing in Gus Bradley, my thing is you're going to get real good at pass rushing, but the secondary is going to be the biggest challenge. I don't think this is a big-time hire, but my only thing is, if they don't reshape what happened this past year, the Raiders, they're going to be in a tough position, especially trying to look forward to the near future. So, news reports in Seattle as offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer was fired from his position out in Seattle even after the loss against the LA Rams in the playoffs. Schottenheimer, who had been there for 3 years as an offensive coordinator, of course, the son of Marty Schottenheimer. It's unfortunate because, listen, I just thought like the Seattle Seahawks were going to be a very interesting team, and it looked like Russell Wilson, he was cooking all throughout the season, and then things started to slow down. I knew the second that they went into the playoffs, the Rams were going to get payback. The defense, I thought, was stellar. I mean, 5 sacks on Russell Wilson? I don't know. It looked like this team was healthy. But ultimately, the offense couldn't generate nothing. The offensive line couldn't even protect Russ. Listen, don't get me started with this Russ is overrated thing. No, he's not. This is not all just on Russ. But it's all about the counterparts. The offensive coordinator, the offensive line. Seattle has a lot of work to do. But after getting rid of Schottenheimer, it's going to be very interesting. But who knows? But they need to fix this up, and they need to fix it up for the better for Russell Wilson and to keep his years in Seattle intact. Because he's ever since that, I've never seen Russell Wilson be hurt at all. Always seems like every year he's been healthy. So we got big-time news here in Chicago as the Bears ended up getting news announcements from Chuck Pagano that he's actually going to retire. So the defensive coordinating position is going to be up for grabs. And Matt Nagy and GM Ryan Pace, they're keeping their jobs. My colleague who covers the Chicago Bears, I know what he's feeling throughout all of this, but here's my thought. Being a defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears, I think is a very attractive job. Only because, think about it, you're getting Khalil Mack, you're getting Jonathan Trevathan, you're getting Roquan Smith, and there's a bunch of different pieces. Now, I do think they need to fix up a little bit on the secondaries, but even at the same time, too, they need a better quarterback. Because Mitch Trubisky's he's not the future. He's not the one that's going to be the future. Absolutely not. I think Mitch Trubisky, you know what his limitations are. And I think it's better off that they go and get themselves a quarterback. Now, sources have been saying about Deshaun Watson. We've been hearing about it for the last couple days. But I don't think Deshaun Watson may go to Chicago even after what happened with the draft. They never talked to him. There was no communication whatsoever. So why would Chicago now have to repair it and then take Deshaun? It's kind of interesting. But I think if I'm Chicago, I definitely give myself a quarterback. I definitely draft a quarterback, build him up, get at least a veteran, and unfortunately for Mitch Trubisky, it's just a position that you and I know his limitations. That this is just who he is. He doesn't have the it factor. He's not special, and that's what's unfortunate. All right, so finally, So a lot of news. Speaking of Deshaun Watson, because he's been slamming everybody. It just seems like he's been on a complete rant. But there are news sources as of right now that that Deshaun Watson, he's obviously not happy in Houston, and I do not blame him. I think Houston just put themselves in the position where you never fix the offensive line. You traded away DeAndre Hopkins. And the defense is not as strong around J.J. Watt. And this is what J.J. Watt, Deshaun Watson, they have to do. It's unfortunate. And I've been saying this about Houston. I will not be mad if Deshaun Watson. But now there's sources that Deshaun Watson could push for trade and push more for trade in Miami, because it seems like everybody's got themselves dialed in Miami, especially Brian Flores. And in the middle of that mix could be Tua, who they kind of have their concerns about and a little bit of the reservation. Now, just imagine that. I mean, Deshaun Watson, I feel like, would have a fun time in Miami. I can already picture it. The offensive line is a little better. I think they need to go and get themselves a wide receiver. And the defense is only getting better from that. As long as Brian Flores is keeping everything straight, this Miami team could be very intimidating, especially when you got Buffalo who's competitive. I'm not sure with New England, but listen, New England's going to do what New England does. And for the Jets, the only thing that you could hope for is hope that it shines on a rainy day. But I just think that Deshaun Watson right now being a hot candidate, after with everything happening and with him in a position where he's just had enough in Houston, it'll be an interesting conversation. But again, I just feel like that if you put him in the right position, I just want to see him succeed. And unfortunately, I can't see him succeed. So, all right, so that was the hot press.
This is the hot press.
Next, my favorite segment of all, and that is going to be my top 10. Instead of it being my top 5, it's going to be my top 3 winners and losers from the Wildcard weekend. You guys do not want to end up missing that. I will have that here coming up next at the bottom of the hour on the Snake Sports Talk Show.
What's up, fantasy champions? Spotlight Sports Network is excited to tell you about an amazing deal from Thrive Fantasy, your place for daily fantasy sports and esports. Right now with promo code SS Network, Thrive Fantasy will match up to $50 of your first deposit. So go to thrivefantasy.com and sign up now with promo code SS Network. That's thrivefantasy.com, promo code SS Network.
Once a raider, bruh, always a raider, bruh. Shit simple as that. You look silver and black. Lot of bread invested in that old line. Car insurance cost the arm and the...
All righty, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank all of you guys for joining in and hanging out with me here on this beautiful Tuesday night. Man, I'll tell you this, though. I mean, congratulations to the Alabama Crimson Tide with their big win last night against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Look, again, it is tough to really kind of, talk about stuff like this when it comes to college football. Again, I've already put my asterisks on college football because of the way that things were kind of shaped up. But still, it's shaped to where we had the top 4 teams, and at least 3 of them were going to be competitive. But initially, you think about Nick Saban, you think about how long that he's been doing this. And then not to mention, I mean, Ohio State, I mean, they got completely boat raced. And it's going to be difficult. But of course, the biggest question is, for how long is it going to last with Nick Saban? I say what you will. I still think he's definitely going to go down as one of the biggest college football coaches that we've had in years. And for me, initially, because the way that I see this whole thing is, I just kind of think that, I just think that there's nothing really to stop them. There's really nothing to stop them. My big thing with college football is that in order for it to really get better, I just feel like they need to balance this out. Because everybody down south, they've been pushing so hard for them to get competitive. And now the SEC is big time competitive. We've never seen, and I hear it a lot of times when it comes to West Coast. I'm like, when was the last time a West Coast region was very competitive? That was it with USC. And USC had not been the same. And it's unfortunate, but I want to see the USCs. I want to see more of the Ohio States. I want to see more of the Notre Dames. I want to see more of all these other teams, because initially when it becomes the same old sob story when it comes to Alabama, respectfully, the last thing really you would need is just seeing Alabama every year being in it, winning the championship, and they're always getting the top 5 best recruiters, the best time recruiting classes. And it kind of just drives people nuts, and that's just the one thing that initially, when it's all said and done, that's where I would love to see college football be balanced. I would love to see that. But only time will tell. Alrighty, guys. So here on my best for last, you guys love it when I do winners and losers. So I have, instead of 5, I now have 3 of my winners and losers from this wild card weekend. And I love doing it. I'm definitely going to have at least another one for the divisional round this next up and coming weekend. So without further ado, here's my top 3. And here we go. Oh, okay, there we go. Whoop. No, not the 2. All right, let's see if we can fix this up. All right, there we go. All right, so number 3 here on my winners is the Buffalo Bills, because obviously the Bills, I know they didn't end up scoring at least a whole lot, but 27 points. The offense is still capable, and Brian Dable again bringing the absolute best to Josh Allen. This Bills team, what they're going to need to end up fixing up is a little bit more of that defense. It kept it close against Indianapolis. But the Bills right now have definitely changed up a lot. And it's going to create a lot of pressures for teams. Because next weekend, you got Baltimore. You got Baltimore while Cleveland is on the road, Kansas City. And so it'll be interesting to see how the Buffalo Bills really play against Baltimore. But if you're Buffalo, you got to have a strong run game. But again, I think the difference is when Baltimore comes into town, they're going to want to be prepared for Josh Allen rather than being prepared for how they were against Tennessee with Derrick Henry. But I think Buffalo right now, they're still a hot team. And it's going to be very interesting to see them next weekend, but I'm pretty excited for what they're going to do. All right, the number 2 team is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think this offense has really clicked, and I think Tom Brady, after winning yet another playoff game in his career, has really shaped this up well. It did take some time, but it's looking like the offense that was promising when the season started. But how about Leonard Fournette, folks? Ronald Jones goes down. Leonard Fournette really picked it up. And I think Tampa Bay, initially, because listen, I thought it was exciting to watch Taylor Heineke throughout the rest of the game with Washington. But in the end of the day, the NFC is going to be very interesting to watch. I think you might have me watch more of the NFC than the AFC, because now you've got Breeze against Brady for the third time this year. Now, the biggest challenge is how Tom is going to deal with that defense. But it's not to say it's not possible, because they got a buckload of receivers. The run game can still be efficient in multiple ways. But I think Tampa Bay, it'll be interesting to see them play against New Orleans. The number one team that upsetted the big-time team that had a lot of noise was the Cleveland Browns. I thought what they did this weekend, they have no head coach due to COVID. They didn't even have at least the important players. And Baker Mayfield still won. They put the money where Pittsburgh's mouths were at. And they shut up the crowd. They shut the critics up. Cleveland could be very interesting. They were dangerous on the run. The offensive line made sure Baker did not get touched. And if you're Kansas City right now, the one thing you've got to be prepared for is what that offensive line is capable of. And they're doing this with a third-string lineman. I mean, it's incredible to me. Now, obviously, the defense needs to button up for Cleveland, because you have to prepare yourself for Patrick Mahomes. But if I'm getting the same performance like I did this Sunday night, I mean, good Lord. Could you imagine what that game would be like against Kansas City? I just thought it was incredible. Kudos to Cleveland, their first playoff win since 1994. They very much deserved it. I mean, it was all deserving from there. Pittsburgh completely unraveled. But those are my top three winners: the Bills, the Buccaneers, and the Browns. Now I'm going to end up going to the other side and the losers. Obviously, I got to put this team up at number 3, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Listen, Cleveland did not even have days to prepare. You had all the time to prepare, and you lost. And worst of all, Big Ben, I think it's time to move on with this. The last thing you want to do is reminisce on old times. There are a bunch of teams that have been doing it for a long time. Okay, how many times have we heard this from Raider fans? Sorry, Dial. We've heard this all the time from Raider fans. We've heard this all the time from so many different fans. But the last thing Pittsburgh needs to do is reminisce more on old memories, and you're not even thinking or preparing for the future. I just think, listen, Big Ben, you won 2 Super Bowls. You were a one-of-a-kind type of quarterback, but it's time to start thinking about the future. I mean, God, last night, that Sunday night, 4 picks out of the 5 total turnovers that Pittsburgh had, unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable. But if it were me, I'd be moving off of Big Ben. All right, the number 2 losers here was definitely the Seattle Seahawks. As I mentioned before on the news, that Brian Schottenheimer, the offensive coordinator, he ends up getting fired. And listen, Seattle's offense was not generating. It was not going according to plan. But a lot of people are like, well, it's all Russ. He's overrated, man. I don't think so. This had nothing to do with Russ. I mean, the offensive line of allowing 5 sacks to their star quarterback, that's pretty bad. And that's too much to handle when you've got Aaron Donald, Michael Bryant, so many others on that front line of the Rams. It was bad. It was absolutely bad. And all the guys like DK Metcalf and others, they disappeared. They absolutely disappeared in that whole game. And the Rams defense, they came away with it. What's going on, Butcher Blog? Oh, Lord. Always roasted me, but hey, it's brotherly love, man. But again, I just think that this all was not all on Russell Wilson. But that offensive line, you need to clean it up. And this offense needs to get better at generating offense because it seemed like they were clicking on all cylinders for like the first 13 weeks, or at least 12 weeks, and then it just started falling apart. And you'll be interested to see who my number one team is that we're losing. Number one, I hate to say this, but it's the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears. Now does everybody know now what Mitch Trubisky's limitations are? I hope you do, because they couldn't generate nothing on offense. The only thing they could have generated was that touchdown pass to Jimmy Graham, and at the end of the game, it's like it didn't even matter. He's just going back into the locker room. He ain't coming back. He ain't coming back. Chicago, they need a lot of work. But here's the thing. Chuck Pagano retires, they're going to need a defensive coordinator. And I think being a defensive coordinator for this team is actually a pretty popular job than you think. Because you have Khalil Mack, you have Trevathan, you have Robert Quinn, you also have Roquan Smith. But the secondaries need a little bit of help. Eddie Jackson needs a little bit of help. But I like how the defense, I like all the defensive pieces. But you got to have the quarterback that helps generate offense. And what's unfortunate is Allen Robinson right now is a free agent. And there are a bunch of teams inquiring. I mean, God, New England is inquiring about Allen Robinson. There are a bunch of players. There are a bunch of teams. And this is where Chicago really needs to get to, in my opinion. So, but Chicago, they 9 points against New Orleans. They looked like they were the absolute worst team, and they started to unfold. But now you know why Chicago, they're in this position. You now know why that quarterback draft was an absolute win. And now Deshaun Watson, he wants out of Houston. You're telling me you're going to repair things out there in Chicago? Come on. Let's be honest. It was a complete mess. All right, so that was my top three winners and losers. So my winners were the Bills, Buccaneers, and the Browns. Sorry, and the losers were the Steelers, the Seahawks, and the Chicago Bears. I think this is reasonable because look, Pittsburgh just talking too much. They are such a damn good team, but they talk too much, and when it comes to games like this where they get embarrassed by Cleveland. I mean, listen, Cleveland, I know, is not a number one team. But for the specific reasons from what I saw this weekend, Cleveland looked like they deserved it. Because, listen, all of us are feeling like we're Cleveland fans. Because they get into the playoffs since 2002. They win their first playoff win since 94. And I like it. I mean, it's a good day to be a Cleveland fan. Unfortunately, Ohio State couldn't get the job done against Alabama. But it's a damn good time to be a Cleveland Browns fan right now. But that's just how I feel with it. The Bears need to work on stuff. The Seahawks need to work on stuff. And I think Big Ben, this is it. That's over. It's over in Pittsburgh. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining me here and hanging out with me here tonight. Definitely tune in to me tomorrow night as hockey is officially underway. We got the season going. Pittsburgh against Philadelphia. You a Flyer or are you a Penguin? But I'm excited to be doing the play-by-play commentary. You guys do not want to end up missing that. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. And we will see you guys tomorrow night. And happy hockey day tomorrow. See you tomorrow.